What's good, Greatness Gang? Welcome back to another reaction. And today I have a very special reaction from the legendary David Bowie. Finally got around to reacting to David Bowie. This is going to be my very first time hearing any David Bowie song, surprisingly. Yes, I have heard his name a lot throughout the years, especially on my journey getting into rock music and certain type of pop music. In interviews and reading articles, I hear a lot of successful major artists talk about how big of an influence David Bowie was to them and was to music in general. Like, I heard his name a lot, so I don't know why I haven't checked out his music yet, but figure, hey, better late than never. So the song we're gonna be reacting to is Space Oddity. But before we check out that, we're gonna check out a clip that I came across, and it's titled The Tragic Life Story of David Bowie, because I did hear a little bit about how his life took a different turn. I don't know all the details, but I heard his stuff here and there, so I'm like, hey, this is a legendary guy, so I'm gonna react to him. Let me also check out him as a person as well. So we're gonna check this clip out before we get into the music, so let's get into it.
David Bowie was an icon in music and pop culture.
Oh wait, so it's Bowie, not Bowie? David Bowie.
Chameleon who changed personas as they occurred to him. But Bowie was a complex and complicated man, having grown up under the shadow of mental illness and a tough home life. Here's the tragic real-life story of David Bowie. David Bowie's mother, Peggy Jones, was born into a family touched by mental illness, and she herself may have fallen victim to some degree. Mark Spitz, one of Bowie's biographers, noted that schizophrenia, quote, seemed to be seared deeply into the genetic code of Bowie's family. The behaviors associated with schizophrenia can seem hidden from outside view, only to be triggered by calamity. For Peggy and her siblings, there were two such forces, their mother Margaret and the Nazis' bombing of England during World War II. According to one account via The Telegraph, Bowie's maternal grandmother, Margaret Burns, was a cruel woman who took her anger out on everyone around her. Two of Peggy's other sisters had exhibited signs of schizophrenia early in their lives, but the nightly shelling during the Blitz in 1940, coupled with the idea of Hitler occupying England, exacerbated the girls' problems. Bowie himself wondered whether he would also fall victim to schizophrenia one day.
I've always found that I collect. I'm a collector. And I've always just seemed to collect personalities.
Some even theorize that he developed so many personas throughout his career as a way of dealing with some latent schizophrenic tendencies. David Bowie's half-brother Terry was born out of wedlock and, due to the stigma associated with such births at the time, was handed off to his grandmother Margaret, who was emotionally and physically abusive to him. According to The Telegraph, his mental illness had its genesis there and grew over time, even when at 9 years old he was sent back to live with his mother, her new husband, and his baby half-brother David. From that point, David looked up to Terry, and there was genuine affection between the two. Terry struggled with his mental illness, but eventually was able to join the Royal Air Force. When he returned from the service, Terry spent his time with David. One night they went to see Cream at a club in London, but the volume of the music proved to be too much for Terry. David took him outside, and Terry had a schizophrenic vision. He saw the ground opening up and fire coming out of it, and he told David he experienced these visions often. After David's father died 2 years later, Terry spent some time in and out of mental hospitals for years until he finally succumbed to his illness, tragically taking his own life in 1986. Several of Bowie's songs, from All You Pretty Things to Jump They Say, are said to contain recollections of Terry, of his visions, and of him as David's big brother. In his adolescence, David Bowie's best friend was George Underwood. They hung out together, played music together, and in one famous incident even fancied the same girl. According to Bowie biographer Mark Spitz, Bowie once sabotaged a date between Underwood and their shared crush, which angered Underwood to the point of violence.
Just walked over to him basically and turned him around and just went whack, without even thinking.
After it was determined that Bowie had sustained a serious injury, he was sent to the hospital. According to one account, doctors noted the muscles in his eye were damaged. He could still see and wouldn't lose his eye, but for the remainder of his life, his left pupil would be permanently dilated. Underwood felt guilty for quite a while afterward, but the injury left Bowie with what he termed a kind of mystique, perhaps best seen on his album cover for Heroes and the close-ups in Valentine's Day.
Gave him a very unique look.
In 2016, many LGBTQ fans and performers paid their respects, often noting his influence in their lives and in queer culture, particularly in the 70s. Then, immersed in his Ziggy Stardust and Thin White Duke personas, Bowie played with androgyny as few performers of his stature had previously.
When Bowie sort of did the Ziggy thing, I inherited Bowie.
He was often asked how he defined his romantic life, to which he gave coy responses. He came out as gay in 1972, as bi in 1976, and finally as, quote, a closet hetero in 1993. No label, however, could truly define him. While his fans applauded his gender fluidity, not everyone was on board. British law in particular had long viewed gay culture as an affront. In the 1800s, it was even punishable by death. Though laws were relaxed somewhat in the 60s, the lifestyle wasn't officially decriminalized until 2000, meaning when he came out in 72, Bowie was admitting to engaging in illegal acts. Bowie might have been born at the right time to be free to express himself.
That's a crazy cover.
For moving acceptance of it forward. Bowie biographer Peter Doggett once mused, "Cocaine was the fuel of the music industry in the 70s. If that's the case, Bowie was well-fueled for much of the decade to almost crippling effect." Bowie guitarist Carlos Alomar told the New York Post that Bowie used the drug to stay up late into the night, sometimes all night, sometimes for days in a row. He claimed its function was to keep you alert, and that's what Bowie was doing. It did not stop his creativity at all.
By the mid-70s, I was so out of my gourd that really it was very impossible. It was all nigh on impossible for me to function in any rational way.
It did occasionally affect his performance on stage. While careful not to appear high in front of audiences, Bowie would sometimes forget lyrics, according to Alomar. In these instances, Alomar would abandon singing his own parts and sing Bowie's in order to get Bowie back on track in the song. But what cocaine did do, however, was sink Bowie into mental states akin to the schizophrenia that the other members of his family had suffered. Doggett wrote, "He spent a decade trying to avoid what his grandmother called the family curse, and then several more years creating his own form of psychosis with cocaine and amphetamines. So bad were his addiction and the related mental issues while making the film The Man Who Fell to Earth in 1975 that Bowie claimed to see what he called, quote, demons of the future on the battleground of one's emotional plane. Soon after, he moved to Germany to clean up.
I do take a degree of theatricality when I go on stage all the time.
In the mid-70s, certain aspects of David Bowie's Thin White Duke persona gave fans pause, mostly for what Bowie himself described as the very Aryan fascist-type qualities of the character. In 1976, he told Playboy, "I believe very strongly in fascism. The only way we can speed up the sort of liberalism that's hanging foul in the air at the moment is to speed up the progress of a right-wing, totally dictatorial tyranny and get it over as fast as possible." He also likened Hitler to rock stars, particularly Mick Jagger, in the way he worked his audiences. And then there was the moment he was photographed waving to fans at Victoria Station in London in a manner that resembled a Nazi salute, per Politico. Bowie eventually recanted his stance on fascism and Hitler. His copious consumption of drugs left him, in his own words, "at the end of my tether physically and emotionally, and with serious doubts about my sanity." In truth, he was exhibiting the symptoms of cocaine psychosis. To escape the cloud that had descended upon him, he did what any great artist would do. He applied himself to his craft, creating 3 of his finest, most acclaimed records, Low, Heroes, and Lodger. On June 23, 2004, Bowie shortened a concert in Prague due to what he thought was a pinched nerve. It wasn't. 2 nights later at the Hurricane Festival in Germany, Bowie had completed a final encore of Ziggy Stardust and collapsed before he could get backstage. He was rushed to the hospital and diagnosed with a blocked artery requiring immediate angioplasty. He remained in Germany until he was well enough to fly, and within 2 weeks was back at his home in New York. No one knew that the June 25th show would be his last full concert. He appeared infrequently over the next 2 years, singing with Arcade Fire at the Fashion Rocks benefit in 2005, performing with David Gilmour in 2006, and duetting with Alicia Keys at the Keep a Child Alive benefit.
Oh, wow, he collaborated with Alicia Keys.
Bowie popped up here and there at benefits or fashion shows, but never again as a full-on performer. He disappeared from the spotlight almost completely until re-emerging in 2013 with his album The Next Day, though he would not play on stage or give a single interview to support the record. According to Rolling Stone, Bowie arrived to the first session of his final album, 2016's Black Star, with no eyebrows or hair on his head. He had been diagnosed with liver cancer and was receiving chemotherapy. He told very few people about it, preferring to keep to himself as he worked toward both beating the disease and creating a musical statement that would outlive him. Black Star's themes of death and the afterlife seem chilling in retrospect. He sang on the track Lazarus, "Look up, I'm in heaven, I got scars that can't be seen." Bowie didn't want word of his condition or of the forthcoming record's existence released to the press, so he had the musicians he worked with sign non-disclosure agreements. Guitarist Earl Slick, who had played with Bowie since '74, said such a step was unnecessary due to the musician's admiration of Bowie as an artist and a person. Slick told a British talk show,
"I signed it, I didn't have to sign it.
Okay.
I signed it because I was asked to. All anybody had to do was to ask to be quiet, and out of respect we would have been."
On January 10, 2016, 2 days after his 69th birthday and the release of Black Star, David Bowie died.
The world was stunned and shaken by the news that David Bowie had suddenly passed away.
The news shocked everyone, as the cancer diagnosis had been kept so quiet. In the weeks leading up to his passing, he recorded demos for 5 new songs, amazing his producer, Tony Visconti. According to Rolling Stone, just a week before he died, Bowie told Visconti he wanted to make one more album. It never came to be. Visconti wrote, "He always did what he wanted to do, and he wanted to do it his way, and he wanted to do it the best way. His death was no different from his life, a work of art." With the news of Bowie's death, fans were left to ponder what he left behind. He had channeled the tragedies of his mother's family's mental illness and that of his brother into the personas that enabled him to express his unique vision and the sounds that accompanied it. He had transcended the accepted attitudes on gender identity to influence generations. He overcame a crippling drug addiction to find peace in his life and the creation of his art. Even though he should have had many more years to live and create, his final work succinctly closed the book on his life, as rich and unforgettable a life as one could hope to live. If you or anyone you know is having suicidal thoughts, please call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK, 8255.
That was the tragic real-life story of David Bowie. Before we even get into the song, like just that little brief history told me a lot. It's like the people that are considered geniuses and the ones that are legendary, it's like they all have a crazy uphill battle and roller coaster ride of a life. We all go through things, of course, but it's like the biggest and best artists, like the ones that have, as they say, an influence over cultures and generations. It's like they all have their inner and outer battles. But like, yeah, I see why his name was mentioned a lot as a influencer over artists that my generation consider greats and some of the biggest successful artists. But let's see how I'm able to take in our very first David Bowie song, Space Oddity. It says 1972, produced and directed by Mick Rock. This is the official video.
Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. ground control to Major Tom.
8, 7, 6,
Commencing countdown, engines on.
3, 2,
Check ignition and may God's love
Lift
be
off.
with you. This is ground control to Major Tom. You really made the grade, and the papers want to know whose shirt you wear. Now it's time to leave the capsule if you dare. This is Major Tom to ground control. I'm stepping through the door, and I'm floating in a most peculiar way, and the stars look very different today. For here am I sitting in a tin can, far above the world. Planet Earth is blue, and there's nothing I can do.
These transitions are so flawless, so smooth. It's like he's smoothly transitioned into something aggressive but easy to listen to.
1,000 miles, I'm feeling very skilled, and I think my spaceship knows which way to go.
It's like, besides the music, his appearance and what he's wearing, it just grabs your attention immediately, even without the music.
My wife, I love her very much.
Very unique look.
Ground control to Major Tom, your circuit's dead. There's something wrong. Can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear me, Major Tom? Can you hear? Am I floating on my tin can? Planet Earth is blue, and there's nothing I can do.
I like those hand claps. That sound like it's like a Morse code type of thing going on. That was David Bowie, Space Oddity. Very, very, very good. Anything that I've heard that kind of reminds me of that, I would say it gives me like a Pink Floyd type of vibe. And I like Pink Floyd, so if David Bowie has more stuff like that, I definitely will be able to enjoy his music. But I'm open to hearing more stuff from him. The visuals, simple yet captivating. Like I said, I was glued to the screen just off his appearance alone. I like the fact that they just put him in a simple music studio and just adjusted the lighting perfectly to emphasize his unique look. His voice is very unique as well. The song had not a lot of nice transitions, pieced it all together very well. That really reminded me of Pink Floyd as well, those transitions and the subtle cinematic type effects, and I like the green waveform that was flashing on the screen. This was very good. Seems like a very interesting man. So let me know if I need to check out more David Bowie. Thank you all. Love you all.